Alright. Hello and greetings, Zanno Thanalis, 3,000-year-old vampire, playing games, learning things, doing whatever else. This is a bit of a mix of the last two, I'd say. Um, Thinking back to my roots a little bit. Uh, Born in the Greek peninsula and around there, so a lot of the Greek myth stuff are things that I was taught growing up, knew plenty about, gave plenty of offerings to the gods. It's already getting to the point where science starting to come in a bit with what's now known as the classical age, and called that at the time, of course, but still have a pretty fond recollection of a lot of the different gods and myths and heroes, and kind of that'll be fun to look back on them in light of like what is known about them in the modern age. We'll think about them and my own thoughts on them. Got a bit of a tier list ready. Good to go. And anything else? Nothing. Not like else that I can think of to mention. Just that this is going to be my own opinions naturally, and if it happens to disagree with yours, I mean, please feel free to share your own opinions and where you think some of these characters should fall. But we're probably going to be different, and don't get, violent or super upset about it. Because in the end, it's just me saying my thoughts. Alright, and here we are. Relatively simple, just S to F, pretty basic. Don't have a specific, set of criteria on which, or what puts each person in which category, but loosely, S tier is nothing wrong with them, absolutely would worship, uh, probably cool people. In the case of gods, here it's more of again, not problematic, actually did a good job and helped people, because that's what I'm mostly looking for in myths, although ideals of what exactly made a hero were quite different back in the day, so I'll probably take that into account, at least some of them. C tier is probably more about oh, they're not bad. You have to turn your eye to some flaws. But if you ignore some of the more problematic parts, then yeah, it seems decent. And then F tier, the very bottom, is absolutely irredeemable. Nothing can bring them back from this. Utterly waste of space as a god or hero. Got a plane to go through. Not exactly sure how long this is going to take. To be more interactive and do guess on where people think they would go, or maybe some middle minute debate on some of the more problematic, controversial, I suppose, figures. But as it is, probably going to be mostly me talking about the different figures, assigning them to spots, and we'll see how many we get through. I've got a fair number prepared. First up, that's going to be Zeus, and for as many of these as I can, or as I could, I suppose, I tried to find pictures of them from off of Greek vases, either the red color vases or the black color figure vases, and then just stuck a little name on them. So a little bit of actual history and how they were depicted in the art of the time, or up to 100 years, hundreds of years earlier or later. Try to be accurate where I could and use pictures where I could find them. So Zeus, big figure in mythology, clearly. I suppose we called King of the Gods in more modern interpretations of it. More of a, after the overthrowing or leading the rebellion that overthrew the Titans, much more of a patriarch figure, I suppose you could call it. By the time was very male-led, male-focused, and in a way that I can look back now and see was pretty harmful to a lot of people, but how things worked. And that meant that Zeus had kind of the final say in how things went, at least when it came to the Olympians, and believed that what he said went, and that's how things just should be. And some other more salacious tales, or folk tales of Greek life. Being the patriarch of the house also meant you could get away with a lot, and Zeus certainly tried his best. The myths about his various dalliances, trysts, however you want to call them, are numerous and probably Zeus is most well known for. I guess on the positive side, you have ruler of the skies, handled the weather. If there was like any large storms, you'd probably worry about him. You gave offerings to him a bunch. So as terms of positives go, thinking Zeus goes real down low on the list. Caused a lot of problems, which make for good drama in the myths, I will admit, but not really someone I'd ever want to be around or hang around or really praise for what he did. Close things, perhaps his participation in the Trojan War, or at least I suppose his lack of it in some ways, having to be distracted so people could get away with things behind his back. But still, not really. I can't really think of a reason to put him any higher than F tier. Just not good. Next up then is Hera. Hera is Zeus's wife, also his sister. It's pretty icky, another one of Zeus's many, many crimes, which hopefully she'll pay for. But Hera is often the person who, after Zeus's dalliances, whatever you want to call them, would kind of swoop in and, being unable to take out her, frankly, well-deserved rage upon Zeus, would direct it towards the victims instead, which is clearly not great. Because it just doesn't actually help them, make things worse for someone who've already mostly likely had their lives ruined. I mean, there's stories of Hercules, or I suppose Heracles. There's stories of Io, who got chased by a gadfly for years and years and years. But also, she is the goddess of marriage and the family, and even though she's a lot of, like, gonna be either a butt of the joke or an active, like, participant making things worse in a lot of the myths, I have a certain amount of both mixed respect and pity for her, I'd say, because of what her role was meant to be, and how she still tried to kind of hang on and do it. I'm not putting her high because she did make things worse all the time, but still D rank because a lot of things, she was in a really, really bad situation, and a lot of things were not as nearly her fault as much as things might have seemed. Third up, Poseidon. Hopefully that text is easy enough to read, and things have gotten cramped. Wait till we get to, like, Hephaestus later. But Poseidon, also somewhat problematic. Believe the infamous rendezvous with Medusa, turned into a gorgon in Athena's temple, comes to mind. Certainly was not guilt-free, but also not nearly as bad as Zeus or Apollo, we'll say. Poseidon was in charge of the waves and the oceans, earthquakes, horses, kind of fingering a lot of pies in that way, and not a whole lot of myths directly about him. One of the more ones I can think of is the Odyssey, where him being scorned, supposedly more called to action by the action of the Cyclops, made a lot of trouble for Odysseus. But even then, that was him responding to the cries of one of his children. Just can't be like, such a bad person for doing that. And I suppose we also have the myth of the founding of Athens, where it was a competition between him and Athena. Athena won, kind of got upset, and threw a bit of fit afterwards. But still, like, did a valuable service in the way of, like, having trade running, keeping the seas smooth a lot of the time, and yeah, not nearly as bad as it could have been, but definitely putting him in, I'd say, B. Not quite A tier, but not too much to, like, have to apologize for either. Hades is an interesting one, in that when I was growing up, the biggest thing about Hades is that Hades was someone to be feared. You did not talk about Hades. Even the name Hades is just literally a pseudonym that means the hidden one, because you don't say his name, you don't get his attention. To talk about death, to invoke death, was to bring it upon you and thereby risk dying. So, because of that, there's not a whole lot of myths about Hades, with the most well-known one being the kidnapping of his wife Persephone, technically being a story about the seasons more than is actually about Hades. Kind of there as a side character, as it were, while Demeter and Persephone are more of the main figures in it. And partially because of that, Hades is someone to be feared, but doesn't seem like that terrible of a person. Mostly he did judge and handle the assignment of the dead in the afterlife. He seemed to do his job relatively well, didn't start a whole ton of fights, didn't show up in a ton of myths, which is probably why. So nothing, again, biggest thing you can point at him and say, oh, that's clearly on him, is the kidnapping of Persephone. And even then, that's one where he went to Zeus and was like, hey, I'd like to have a wife. And it's like, oh, that one, go and take her. So, not instated by Hades, but still definitely did not handle it well. And then it's unclear if Persephone left state of her own free will, if they talked things out, come to some kind of agreement, or if he was actually holding her in the underworld against her will, and the whole pomegranate thing was a trick to coerce her to staying. Different versions, not helped by the fact that a bunch of Christians basically decided that because Hades lived in the underworld, he was clearly an analog for the devil, and thereby should be the most evil figure in all the myths. So further complexity, can't quite put him in some of the higher tiers, just not well known enough, but I'll put him in C tier. One big thing to apologize for, not a whole lot to mention, seems like he did his job okay. Like the one time that Heracles came down to grab Cerberus from the underworld, take him back up for one of his many famous labors. I mean, Hades kind of just let him go. He's like, alright, have him back by 9, not a problem. So, seems relatively chill. Speaking of chillness, Ares, who was not, as far as we know. Ares is also interesting. There isn't a ton of myths about him, but what there is kind of just the general vibes, which is war, liking chaos, the famous affair with Aphrodite, where he's kind of this, I suppose kind of what you'd call a macho man, I suppose, modern day. Very kind of, buff, takes what he wants, whatever. And then when he actually fights in the Trojan War, is helping out there, doesn't quite live up to his power set, I suppose you'd say, where he gets a thing that seems to make much more of a difference than Ares does in a fight. I mean, he's better than Aphrodite when it comes down to it in that situation, but still can't really, doesn't seem to cause a whole ton of problems, doesn't seem to lean too much into anything, but isn't a peaceful, helpful figure in any case either. So definitely bottom half at the least. But I will bump him, keep him at C, because even though he's a bit of an issue in some cases, he in the Roman tradition he crossed over with the god of Mars, who was originally a god of agriculture, and thus became a lot more tempered by that. I'm not going to go through all the Roman counterparts for all these different gods. I can respect someone who kind of rides the line there between industry and work and labor and farming, and then picking up the weapons when you need to go to war. So I'll keep it C tier. Next up is Athena. Athena is a god I have lots of respect for. While my education, while living there, was limited before becoming a vampire, I have respect for Athena, and that she's someone who, despite springing forth from Zeus's forehead, and thereby you could imply that all her knowledge and skill is technically either inherited from or stolen from Zeus by her, I don't believe that. And Athena in a lot of the myths seems to be relatively cool-headed, helped out Odysseus a lot actually, and generally seems a good mix between chill and very intelligent and smart. I lost temper a couple of times. I mean, the who's the name? Wasn't Ariadne, the Weaver, the Weaver contest. That one was Arachne. That's one of her low points. Uh, so there is some pride there, but I'd still stick her in A tier. It's definitely not just a figurehead, and just good to see some like I guess like something that Greek mythology does decently well actually is having strong, notable like female figures like Athena, Artemis, Hera to some degree. We can look at some other traditions, and there's not quite as much about like Juno and such in the Roman tradition, or if you go to the Norse tradition, again, there's less, or I guess Celtic as well, I can think of. There's less focus on these like on the goddesses being just equal in power than their male counterparts. It's good to see that. I want to stick Athena high up for that. Following after that is then Artemis, who has a fair number of myths about her, partly due to being tied in with the Theban cycle of myths. One of the more infamous moments is where she is when a hunter like spies upon her taking a bath. She turns him into a deer and he gets eaten by his own hounds. And also one where one of her she's well known for having a bunch of virgins like following her around, which and she was seen as a protector of youth and like young women up until they were either of age to handle themselves, or went off to do their own thing. But once they no longer kind of fit that tradition, where one, say, weird story, Zeus transformed himself into an animal, got one of the Hunters of Artemis pregnant, and once Athena or Artemis found out, she kicked them out of the band. So protection and definitely does a good service. It's been a respect for the land, which I think we could do a lot more of nowadays. But protection only goes so far, and if you kind of go outside the bounds of that, can be rather callous. So I think I've got to put her in B tier, where there's don't put her quite high enough in A. Unless we're talking about the depiction of Artemis in the game Hades, roguelike that came out a couple of 2 years ago, perhaps. In which case, S tier Artemis is fantastic in that game. Next up is Artemis's brother Apollo. Apollo does a lot of things. I mean, he's got prophecy, got the Oracle of Delhi. You've got the poetry thing. You've got music. You've got healing. Bit of a grab bag in cases. Archery and gave sicknesses to youth, like male youth and men. So yeah, plenty there. And yet, despite all of that, he's still known for like chasing after a nymph and then begging their father to turn them into a tree instead of letting themselves be caught, and then saying, I'm going to take the leaves from your branches, I'm going to take some of your branches and say, this is my like favorite tree now. And there's the one guy who was playing with, like tossing a discus, and then the guy got hit in the head by the discus, possibly interference from Artemis or the wind, and he died. So a lot of people that Apollo tends to be in love with tend to die off. Like, or get turned into various things in a way that's concerning enough. I cannot point to anything specific and say, oh, this was a good enough act that he did, or good enough thing as part of to put him very high. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with E, where he had some redeeming qualities, more than Zeus at least. But still not a whole lot to go around, a lot of chasing after people who really did not want to be chased off. Paul could not take no for an answer. Alright, Hermes, a much tamer example. Hermes, someone who was born and literally immediately started committing crimes. Did not hesitate. Practically days after he was born, stealing a herd of cattle. Known to be the kind of god of like messengers, travelers in a lot of ways, thieves, kind of the people who were lower in power status in the country and didn't have a lot of people to turn to. Zeus certainly isn't going to look out for him. Hardly anyone else is. I think Hermes kind of took those people under his wing. That's a bit of a interpretation on my own side. Got some points off for just kind of general thievery, I think, because even though usually he was put to some decent end, there's still plenty of tricks that he played. But I think I'll actually put him in A tier because like not much to complain about. I don't really have anyone in S tier, but I think I might be about to change with Hephaestus. Again, text very small. Apologies for that. Hephaestus. Um, Tossed out of Olympus either by Zeus for attempting to help Hera, or by Hera for being born with like a crooked leg. Um, you have to feel bad for him. He's married to Aphrodite. Some would say like, oh, that's clearly a boon, but it was only because all the other gods were about to go to war, and then like of who was going to marry Aphrodite, decided, oh, we'll marry her off to Hephaestus. Nobody sees Hephaestus as any kind of threat or barely as a person. Clearly, that doesn't count as an actual marriage. The whole affair with Ares, all of that. Hephaestus just seems to make things and kind of be okay with that. I mean, he lived, according to some of the myths, he lived on an island for a while, not even in Olympus, and just did his craft there. I guess one of the big ones with Hephaestus is when he made the golden chair, which he then had Hera sit in and refused to let her out until she thing. And specifically what he made her do, I think like confess something, or the golden net with Ares and Aphrodite, where he caught them in trap and everyone was like, oh, yep, that's fine, I'd still do it. So he's really kind of a laughingstock in a lot of cases, but seems like not a bad guy, and generally probably pretty helpful, so I think I'm going to stick him in S tier. Nothing wrong. I'd be fine. I would not mind like asking for the like I'd make an offering to ask for the blessing of Festus before like making something in arts and crafts. Dionysus, next up, is a complicated figure. Where he is twice born of Zeus in a way that kind of rides a line between like demigod and actual god, and is the god of madness, but also drama and wine and alcohol and parties in a way that people were a big, big fan of back in the day. Again, he's somewhat complicated, just in that he like made entire boats full of sailors go mad, but also did a lot in just the form of like throwing parties, keeping things going. Again, drama, the Dionysia, like big drama festival that went on once a year. Fantastic, did a whole lot for literature and drama. We think of like sort of storytelling nowadays. There's still echoes that have just come on down through time. I'd say like certainly he was weird and probably would not want to get on his bad side, and might not want to risk getting on his good side either, depending on how it went. But still have to give him credit for what he did, and I think that puts him in B tier. Right, next up on to Aphrodite. Aphrodite, not a red figure, black figure vase, but still, I think this might be Roman in origin where I found this. Aphrodite, goddess of love, question mark, more often seen as lust and just jealousy. If Hera is, I mean, full like triple goddess like the Morgan, or the Fates, even we've got like okay, Maiden, Mother, Crone. There are different parallels that can be drawn between some different like female figures in Greek mythology. But almost always you would say that Aphrodite probably fits the maiden archetype most of any of them. If Hera is the mother, and then Athena potentially the crone, could be Hestia the crone, Demeter the crone. It's again things that will be there, but Aphrodite is definitely fills in that thing of like young, youthful, jealous, proud, started the Trojan War. It was refused by rejected by Narcissus, and cursed him to fall in love with reflection. A lot of myths are people either spurning her, or her deciding to take revenge on people, or just causing messes. A lot of it is not good. So Aphrodite is not going to go very high on here, but I can also recognize that, at least in tradition, part of that is the fear of, like we were often telling stories, of someone who is young and beautiful in a way that is shamed and made fun of, but also sought after. almost everyone. So making her this like jealous figure who only causes problems is like matches the personality, but also isn't like entirely probably not the entire like objective truth. So I'm not going to put her in F tier because I do think that love can be important and is important. I just don't think that she often did that. So probably sticking her in E next to Apollo in the not inherently bad by nature, but certainly cause more problems than they solve. Last one of the major gods is Demeter. Not one that gets talked about a lot, kind of fade into obscurity at a certain point, and again, biggest myth about Demeter is just the kidnapping of Persephone, which is mostly a myth to explore the changing of the seasons, as Demeter turned froze over the entire world, and only stopped when received Persephone back, which only comes back for half of the year, spend the other half in the underworld. So when she's up in the overworld, Demeter is happy, like sun's shining, whatever. You got summer, like spring, like late part of spring and part of fall, and then when she's gone, it's when it goes into late fall, winter, etc., etc. But seems like fulfills the mother role in a lot of ways, and is seen as being like perhaps a little like overtly controlling or hovering in some ways with the story of Persephone, but doesn't seem bad. Just stern and, well, cold in some cases. Again, a lot to go off of, which I think would probably put her in C tier, along with the not a whole lot. But there is a mention of one of her epithets in Homer, where she's called Demeter, like, of the golden sword. So we know there's some kind of warrior aspect in there somewhere, and it could have been talking about like gold swords and like a scythe used for cutting down wheat potentially, or it could have just been actually there were more myths about her participating more in like war or various actions. They're just myths that have been lost. So many lost by the time that I was alive, and even more have dropped off the face of the planet since then. But I will bump her up to B, mostly for the mention of the golden sword because that seems sick, and I want to know more about that. Next up, exactly half an hour so far, making time. Next up then is going to be some of the major heroes, and going to start off Theseus. And Theseus is one where there's a bunch of myths, like he might have been a reaction to myth of Heracles in some way, with the different like tasks that he underwent. And they're again interesting. A lot of them we either kind of mimicry of the Heracles tasks, or involved him like encountering someone on the way and then killing them. Famous like person who like would tie people to trees, so the trees go up and like lay them around till they died, or like chop off their like head and feet until they were the right size for the bed, whatever. Person he just like kicked off a cliff again. But Theseus is a figure who also like was a king, was taken was a prince, went like found his birthright. Genuinely seemed like not a bad guy, but perhaps a little hasty to just turn to violence as, if not the only, the first solution to a lot of problems. So Theseus started a whole bunch of mythology, definitely deserves some respect, but I can't just say he was like up here in the upper half as either. I'll put him in C tier as well. Getting a lot of characters in C tier so far. I have to like mush them a little more together depending on how this goes. Next up though is Odysseus, who is, spoilered, going to go in some of the top ones. Odysseus is underhanded, often deceitful, smart, goes after, falls after Poseidon and Athena a lot, especially in the story of the Odyssey. Athena helped him out to the point of appearing and directly aiding him in battle. He basically put an end to the Trojan War alongside Achilles. Like, Achilles did the thing first, took out Hector, then Odysseus kind of like wrapped it all up. The story of the Trojan horse, all of that. Only joined the Trojan War in the first place because he made an oath, everyone did, to like if someone took Helen, everyone would go join up and fight against them. didn't want to go, faked being insane, and only was like proven that he wasn't and brought back to the ship forced to go because whoever went to like go and send him dropped his like baby child in front of the plow, and he stopped plowing because he's not going to go over his child. So, family man spent 10 years trying to get back home, believed his wife was faithful the entire time. Not quite S tier, simply because of the well, he's a little bit of just a liar in that he will probably take advantage of you if you ever let him. And again, it's kind of prideful. I want to see their story of him actually like taking out someone else in the Trojan War who got like more respect, more accolades than him like that. You have to look that one up to be more specific. But definitely A tier, just a good solid hero who seemed to care about the people around him and seemed to be a good, decent leader and didn't just rush headlong into battle constantly. So we put him very high. Atalanta is a smaller figure. Don't know if quite deserves to have the like hero status in this case, but someone who definitely like did stop the Thracian, but just stop the big boar. No, Themysciran, I think. Perhaps boar, like very good runner, like refused to like settle for someone. Those, and then the famous race with the golden apples. That was a case where the person had Aphrodite literally helping them with the golden apples, and potentially making Atalanta fall in love with the person before he even started the race. Come on, made her take it easy on him or go through with the bargain afterwards. So that one's unfortunate. Then she gets turned to kind of like this prize to be won, even though it's hers who set the circumstances. But gods cheat, and it's kind of relegated to okay, now you're this person's wife. After that, would have loved to have had Atalanta be again this like strong, like fighter heroic figure in her youth, like perhaps still get married, whatever, and then continue to be a hero and do things afterwards, but like Heracles or Theseus, who are many of these other great ones. So again, I can't put her in S tier just because of the issues with the Golden Apple story kind of fading off into obscurity. But I think again A tier, and just that I like Atalanta and I wish there was more of her. Honestly, I think deserves better. Jason. Jason. The story of Jason, as in Jason and the Argonauts, Jason and the Golden Fleece, is like someone writing a self-insert character in fanfiction, where they take a bunch of the heroes of myth and stick them together and say, and they all listen to this guy. And this guy has all of their respect, and all the gods love him, and everyone loves him. One of the most famous parts of Jason myth is, of course, Medea. Aphrodite forced her to fall in love. She helps him out with all the tasks which he blatantly could not have done without her. And then, as they're leaving, even chops up her brother to like delay the people who were chasing them, which is not great, believe me. And then Jason abandons her shortly after. I guess not shortly after, but makes it back to Athens, and then promptly like hang around there for a bit, and then just says, "Oh, I'm actually going to marry this princess. I know I've had 2 kids with you, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. Just gonna send you away." Medea's reaction, not great, but Jason is kind of a scumbag, at least in my reading of it. And I'm not very fond of someone who it felt like didn't do a whole lot himself and relied upon the help of the gods or people that got ensorcelled or other heroes to do most of the work for him. The story of the Argonauts is that they literally stayed somewhere, like left, storm blew them back in, and it was so dark that no one could see who it was, and the people on the island attacked whoever they helped with invading, and it ended with like the heroes killing almost everyone on the island by the time the sun rose and they could see what was going on. So yeah, not a lot of good things to say about Jason. He's a hero, sure, brought back the Golden Fleece, all that. I think is F tier. Achilles. Uh, Seeing here The Wrath of Achilles, it is one of the most famous stories ever told in a way that is dramatic and has a concise character arc in a way that is surprising. Like, often you can be surprising to see in something that was created so long ago, but they still had character arcs and characters and character development even back then. Clearly, someone who has problems and has rage issues, although Agamemnon was in this army, so justifiably so, some would say. But overall, Achilles fought and died in a war that wasn't his own out of glory. So can't put him up in S tier, but you've just gotta have respect for the man. Uh, war crimes though bumps it down to a B instead of an A. Still, Hector, the counterpart, less well, I guess not less well known than Achilles because in same story, but less known about, and possibly because of that, because he's fighting for the Trojans, I'm actually going to put him up in the A tier because after Achilles killed Hector, he dragged his body around the city a couple times, incredibly disrespectful. After Hector killed who he thought was actually Patroclus, he didn't, and actually seemed to treat him fairly and seemed to be a good fighter and one of the best of King of Troy's like Priam's sons and descendants. Fair bit better than Paris. So actually putting him a rank higher than Achilles, despite being known a lot less, because he seemed to have honor and fought to protect more than he ever did to attack or for glory. And I can respect that. Agamemnon. Agamemnon's pretty awful. He's a jerk and proud and thinks he should be the ruler of everything. Literally got killed after returning from the Trojan War because his wife was super upset that he had tried to he had sacrificed like their daughter before leaving as a tried to I think as a sacrifice to like Poseidon to like make the ships go on time. So yeah, I don't think I really have anything good to say about Agamemnon. Jerk, again, just super proud and arrogant. I don't think deserved nearly much of what he got and then the praise that he got, or the fact that he was leader of all the armies who fought in the Trojan War. Relatively quickly then, on to Perseus. Perseus is now probably more well known for the Percy Jackson series as a name. Kind of interesting that he matched with Jason, that he got a lot of help from the gods. I mean, one of his biggest stories about killing Medusa, which literally involved him getting like winged sandals, a shield, and one other thing from the gods to help him in his task. If like maybe it was less deserved, but then actually on his way back, he like finds someone chained up and being like fed to a sea monster and swoops in and uses what he had not just for the task he was given, but to actually save someone who was in peril at like I'll admit like risk to himself. And for that, I think that Perseus does deserve some respect and to be put a little bit higher. He might not have been as famous as, of course, like Heracles or Theseus was. Perseus, not a bad guy. Like, seemed pretty good, honestly. So, sticking up in A tier as well. And a lot more up in here now. Hercules, the big one. Of course, the Disney movie has done a lot to spread the word, albeit erroneously. But Heracles is a conflicting figure in that you can probably tell looking at all the different myths, and if they're compiled together, they conflict. It feels like the first, I believe it was either 6 or 8 myths, scene makes sense, and after that, some of the other ones get like tacked on. He has a bunch of extra myths, and I feel like people just keep on telling stories about him, different people at different times, and trying to spread the myth in a lot of different ways. And those myths vary from like just trying to do tasks. Well, actually, the reason he was doing the trials in the first place was to like atone for being driven mad and killing his entire family. Unless that was before that. But again, someone who had rage issues and did a bunch of tasks to like get a wife, and then shortly afterwards did more tasks and went into service to a foreign queen to try and like woo her. So Heracles seems like someone who wanted something and just went straight for it and didn't let anything stand in his way. But often what he wanted was like either like revenge or absolution or, you know, another lady despite already being married. So putting him, I think, probably in C tier for the mixture of bad things, but in good ways, just for the sheer legacy that Heracles left behind. It is like very, very hard to understate. Oh, sorry, I meant very, very hard to overstate. Other direction. Okay. Last one from this list is Bellerophon. Again, one very, very small text to read. Bellerophon is a kind of weird myth in that one of the biggest things, just like the store, as like the saying, "Don't shoot the messenger," came from Bellerophon. He was told, "Okay, deliver this message to this king." Went, delivered the message. Message said, "Kill this person who delivered you the letter," and then king's that connects him off on some tasks, whatever. And just known for having the Pegasus, either the or a Pegasus, somewhat unclear, and generally not a bad hero, but also kind of bland. I get a lot of like character from the myths in like what he did, what he wanted, mostly like went places, was told, do a task, did a task. And then the one kind of thing we get is like at the very end he went back to get revenge on someone by having them like ride on Pegasus, and then when they're high and just kind of like tilted back and let him fell off. So I think I'm probably sticking with C next to Heracles, and that they just don't, again, just in the bland, not a whole lot to go off of. And a mixture of like, we're a hero, did things like slew the Chimera, also like took revenge on someone and dropped them from a very, very high height, which is intimidating somewhat. So that is it for the heroes. Moving on next to some of the minor gods. These probably have ones that are less well known, have less myths, kind of more like tertiary characters at best. These ones will probably go faster than the main ones. Oh, there he is. Oop, and mind someone else. Pan, a satyr. Satyrs in mythology are probably not what you think they are. Or wild, probably like partiers, orgiastic in a lot of ways. Satyrs are wild. Pan though was more like he's kind of like god of wild places. You get panic from him. He could like make people like run off in terror, but was a guardian in a lot of ways. Panpipes, famous battle against like not battle, but like music duel up against Apollo, which he lost. And seems a generally good figure, so sticking up in B tier, even though there's not a whole ton about him. Hestia, I'm going to pause on this one. Not very many minutes about Hestia, mostly because like she was so omnipresent that she was in every house, every hearth was a tribute to her, and that she was someone who was a guardian and like protector. And there's more myths about her in like with Rome with the Vestal Virgins, where she was very, very important in that society, but also had a bunch of the myths like redacted or moved from texts because she was so important that there was a cult about her, and part of being the cult is you don't talk about the information outside of that, you don't write down, it's passed down one to the other. Some of the different like mysteries as well, like Dionysus and other gods were like that as well. So not a whole lot to go off of there, but just seems generally benevolent, good figure. I'm sticking her in S tier. Nyx, another weird one. There's not a whole lot of knowledge about her, only appears like in a couple of small myths, but is the knight, and for that goes in A tier just by sheer fact of I'm a vampire, I like the knight a lot. Persephone, the wife of Hades, albeit potentially unwilling, but if you look at some of the myths beforehand, it was less, oh, Hades is super scary and Persephone's wife is super sweet. No. He was king of the underworld, she was queen of the underworld. in all that that meant. Persephone, we also believe, could also have very well just been another pseudonym similar to Hades being the hidden one, where they came from like her just being called like the youth or the maiden, basically. Where she was also scary. You also did not book Persephone, and they were in it together. This is, the kidnapping later then kind of rolls that back a bit. We're not sure like which one came first or how which direction went exactly, or what role she had in it precisely. But I tend to be, again, I like strong female figures in myths and stories, and so I like the idea that Persephone is just secretly, or semi-secretly, also just very scary and the queen of the world and everything that that means. And not just like, oh no, I like flowers and was kidnapped. Nah, so I want also her to have her in A tier. Can't put her in S tier because there's lack of proof, but at least putting her there because she deserves it and I want her. Rhea is the wife of Cronus, mother of Zeus and a bunch of the other gods, and I want her here because the biggest thing we have about her in myth is just that she basically created the Olympian gods, with there being the prophecy that a son of Christ would kill him, so ate all his children, and she substituted a rock for Zeus. He raised up, managed to then later, invoke the rebellion, overthrow the Titans, brought about the, age of the gods. And the fact that she, as a mother and wife, put up with her, again, mythological figures work differently. She put up with her husband eating their children for 5 times, and then the 6th one was like, nope, I'm doing something here. That kind of courage and fighting back and taking care of Zeus, even though it was hard and nigh impossible, that gives her some serious respect. So, also sticking her next to Persephone and Nyx in the A tier for not having a lot of myth there, but I like what there is. Kronos, husband to Rhea, father of Zeus, etc., etc. Biggest myth is again him being overthrown by the Olympian gods. It's okay, what was here before? How do they rise up? And there is some just interesting stuff there to look back on and try and figure it out, and father son and king aerodynamics in different myths, starting with Kronos and Zeus, and looking on kings like Theseus and his father, Perseus and his father, all these things, and the king is inevitably often prophesied to be overthrown by their own children in a way that seems natural if we look at how kingdoms usually pass down, a way they react violently and angrily to, instead of more peacefully handing things over and accepting this is how things will often be. They're not going to be around forever, and being willing to pass on that power. But that said, ate a bunch of his kids, got killed, and then his chopped off lower parts is what eventually then became Aphrodite. So we're going to stick him down in E tier. Nah, no, I can't think of anything. I can't think of why he's not an F. Yep, seems irredeemable to me. The Furies. Others had the odd mythological figure. Only one here. There were 3 traditionally, and that they were also feared, but that they were from the underworld. But they were the bounty hunters almost. The famous one of the more famous times that came up was with the myth of Orestes, where Clytemnestra killed Agamemnon, her husband. Orestes came back and, as revenge, killed her, which was then considered to be a sin the Furies come after, because killing your own family members was a sin the Furies would take you down to then want to be eternally punished for. He eventually got away with it. There was a court and everything, at least in one of the myths by Euripides. They're not myths, but plays. But they were people who only attacked people who had actually done something worthy of being attacked for. They weren't wild, and while they were cruel, they were only cruel to specific people who seemed to have deserved it. This kind of overwhelming justice that the underworld and death, and the Fury as well, represented. And for that, I can't put them too low, but I think we'll probably stick them in C tier for the kind of cruelty and, well, I guess cruelty and purpose. And I'm not going to take them too high. Hecate, another very minor deity, but one that, much like no one's in A tier, I find to be extremely cool to look at, because Hecate is the goddess of, considered to be magic, darkness, guides, doorways. A lot of like in new paganism, uh, a lot of guys, Hecate is looked up to, respected by, or maybe not worshipped, but looked to as kind of this like patron deity of witches, like witchcraft in a lot of ways. Something about like night, guides, doorways, options. Like it's very very cool conceptually. One of the biggest myths she appears in is like guiding Demeter down to the underworld to go find Persephone. And she's like pausing, like, "Oh, you need directions? Great, got you. Just follow the little floating torch." Despite Hermes being the official like psychopomp for that. So Hecate also extremely cool. Basically no myths. Also going in S tier because I just really like the vibes, and I wish there was more. Honestly, Hecate and Hestia both deserve better. Eris, biggest myth is the Apple of Discord, which also triggered the Trojan War, although it was probably more Aphrodite's fault. But that came because Eris was originally left off of the invite list at a wedding. And it wasn't just like, oh, we have like I'm just going to show up and just cause chaos for no reason, was intentionally slighted, and so took some revenge out of it. And it wasn't even anything directly that harmful, it wasn't meant to cause a war. It was literally just like, oh, they didn't show up, I'm going to make them fight over this apple. I make them just toss in the cause and watch them fight over the apple. It's the pettiest of petty revenges. And for that, Eris, Discord, I think goes relatively high because I can get behind some petty revenge, I'll admit. I'm certainly not above a little bit of it. Don't approve of people getting wrapped into it and becoming such a huge thing. That's really more on Aphrodite and exactly like how she went about like rewarding this person. Like, oh, give the best wife ever by stealing someone else's who you know they have a pact that they're going to get involved in. The Aphrodite, really? So C because Discord inherently bad, but I really can't be angry at her for like the one thing she did. Kind of alter that is we have Tyche, who is the goddess of fortune, and one that isn't talked about very much. Again, a lot more conceptually, but seemed to be favored by was favored by merchants, people who like did things of luck or just wanted like fortune and help. Hermes also had stuff to do with merchants, but Tyche was let's call it like the gambler's best friend, but not just gambling, also just like luck and looking at the bright side of life in a lot of ways. Where if you were blessed, if you really had to be blessed by Tyche, like even the worst situations, you would find some way to like turn them around or at least look on the bright side. And again, not a lot about Tyche, much more conceptually, had a lot more prevalence in the Roman literature and stuff, which we like can still find and look back on. But still, I'm sticking her in at least B tier because I like a little good luck. Nothing wrong with it. Muses, again, only one face on the picture. There are between 3 to 9 of them. Perhaps even 12, depending on how you look at it. But inspiration for specific kinds of like there's a muse of like oral history and poems. There was a muse over like specific kinds of music. There's myth over like muse over like I think mourning songs, like the sad like someone died kind of mourning. And this is again like they didn't really do a whole lot like directly. It was just when you had plays or drama or poems, it will directly invoke and say, "Hey, please like bless this thing that I'm about to do, that it will turn out well, that it will be efficient." And I can agree with that and want some more, want a little more luck and like in like things that I'm creating and want them to turn out well. So I can do that, and I think also original to put them in S. There's not my favorites, I suppose. Like I put more A because of that. Yeah, not my favorites, but appreciate them. And yeah, I wouldn't mind like winging a little blessing or prayer their way now and again. The Fates or the Moirai are the before they have like the maiden mother crone kind of trio. You have the birth, the life, and the death, or like the unspooling of the string, the measuring of the string, and the cutting of the string. These would dictate what your life looked like, how long it was going to be, how complicated and messy it was going to be, and often when it went bad, you would blame it on the fates and the life they had cut out for you. It's unsure if they had power over the gods or if the gods had power over them, but there are prophecies that like Kronos was like afraid of, and then on time it seems like Zeus could like go and say, hey, do this for me. This might have been a more equal standing potentially where they both had, where like they could listen to what the gods said, but it was up to them if they decided to do it and the gods had to listen to what they said. So often scary, you could say, because they seem to control your entire life, but also not inherently evil. It kind of like it didn't seem like they decide so much. It was how things were how they were, and they were just the messengers saying this is how things are going to be. And I mean, the prophecies were kind of cool. So sticking them in C because it didn't do anything inherently harmful, but not exactly helpful either. Just extreme neutral, true neutral, absolutely. Uh, so remember more about this figure. I believe Leto is the mother of. Leto was the mother of Athena, if I had it right. Where, I don't know if that was Leto or Thetis, though. I should double check on this one if I didn't know what I was getting into when I actually put it on here. But you could briefly looking it up just to make sure I should have. Okay, yes, that's what it was. All right. Thetis is the mother of Athena, who was then killed off by Zeus to prevent like bearing a son. One of the only examples where a prophecy was actually successfully averted by taking direct action against it, oddly enough. But no, Leto was a bride of Zeus and mother of Apollo and Artemis. And Hermit's interesting because after getting with Zeus, was banished by Hera and cursed to like not give like birth on land, which resulted in an island being born so she could give birth to them on the island which hadn't already been cursed. And then later got insulted by some other people, I believe. I want to say it was a queen who had 12 children and said that her children were better than Artemis and Apollo. And because of that, Apollo came and like killed all of them so that mother, that queen, was like just left alone. So interesting, very, very small figure, but one where just have the aspect of motherhood and the like being willing to do that and being really very respected by Apollo and Artemis for what she did and how she gave birth to them and the work she put into that. The killing all the kids, that one's a bit dark. But so I think I'll put her in D for that. Relatively minor figure. Iris, also extremely small, messenger between the gods, but definitely like in a lesser way than Hermes was, and rainbows. I think more just like people looked at a rainbow and like someone went, "What's that?" And they went, "Oh, that's when the gods are talking to each other. They send Iris a rainbow to go and like convey the message." Almost like Heimdall with the bridge in Norse mythology, saying, "Oh, what's a rainbow? Oh, it's a bridge. People in Asgard are coming down to Earth to do something or whatever." So Iris, not a lot about her. I'll also stick her in C just because very, very true neutral. Eros, also known as Cupid, the son slash like minion in some ways of Aphrodite, where he was the more direct and remote application of her abilities, like with Medea before. She sent Cupid to go and like shoot Medea with the arrow, force him to fall in love, and he proved he was more powerful than Apollo with a bow by like shooting him with making him fall in love with someone. So Eros is mischief and not controlled, but directed often by Aphrodite, it feels like, but often made things worse or more complicated. One of his myths, though, is falling in love with Psyche and then trying to stay with her and just like lie next to her in bed at night, which is kind of creepy. She broke the neo, looked at his face, he had to run away. But like, it's a weird contrast between him apparently trying to be a good husband, at least as good as he could, in a way that he eventually did. Once like it's like it caught up to him when like managed to like solve all those trials, but also just kind of being weird, and then he started a whole lot of conflict and drama with Medea and all that. So I think I'm also going to stick him in D tier, where he's like has some good sides, but mostly just causes problems and makes a mess of things. Again, minor characters. These are very much like other, not quite heroes, but often either victims or just other immortal troublemakers. Medea's not on this list. I realize I should have put her on the list. Medea's interesting, but I would have stuck Medea in E tier because she is definitely like a villain and that she is willing to kill children and kill competition and kill family for uh for what she loves or what she wants or out of revenge. So just apologies. So Medea probably would be in the E tier. Orion, no picture, couldn't find a good one. Just get this nice box. Warding a lot of the characters in this section are just going to be the same like gradient box. But yes, Orion is the fabled like lover slash friend of Artemis, who she was impressed by his skill with the bow and became close friends, and potentially killed by the interference of Apollo, which then could lead to why she later kills one of Apollo's like lovers, again, Discus. So like a good guy, but also like a big hunter. I'm not that super fond of, I suppose. And also the kind of allegations isn't necessarily like the right word, but can't think of anything better at the moment. Of like Artemis being like lovers, with Artemis being one of the only three virgin goddesses. Kind of just feels weird to me. So I think just out of like those things, I'm also going to put him in D tier. In that I'm not sure what I feel about the myth itself. That he seemed like a generally decent, kind, nice guy. But then his weird figuring that he like just kind of was a hunter and then died in the myth to make Artemis sad. And I don't quite know how to feel about. Orestes, mentioned before, um, killed his mother for killing his father, and then managed to survive and not be killed by the Furies. And the fact that he was also originally told to kill his mother for killing his father, he's told that by Apollo. He's literally following the will of the gods to do it, and then gets like in trouble for it with the Furies. So, little unsure where to put him because he's most well known for murder, like plain and simple. But it was like revenge that he was forced to do in a weird way. So I think also D tier, just out of like conflicting story and weird vibes, and maybe just don't do murder next time. Phaedra, also weird. Story where you have the her stepson, who is like she falls in love with, and it's unsure if it's the god's intervention or just her very depending on the myth. But most of them, she eventually like finds out about her affection, rejects her, and then she commits suicide, blames him, and he dies. This is Hippolytus, different versions of the play, but generally either a very tragic figure or like almost laughably evil in how she's like, I love my son, he rejected me, therefore I will kill myself and make sure he dies. So I think putting her in E tier overall for the tragic configuration of the character, and that puts unsure if she was, if it was Aphrodite messing around again, unsure. But generally not a good figure in the myths. Tantalus. Tantalus had a weird thing going on where he felt like he needed to prove that he was better than the gods, so he fed the gods his son. F tier for that. I don't have a whole lot of patience for people like that. Speaking of, Atreus. Um, he was going to be the ruler of a city. Which one exactly might have been Thebes. I think it was Thebes. Um, and his brother managed to uh, like seduce his wife, get Atreus to agree that like whoever like had could provide this piece of proof would be the king, and then through Atreus' wife, God produced it, became king, and Atreus in revenge is like, by his brother's Thyestes, uh, Atreus in revenge is like, okay, cool, let me invite you over to a big feast after you became the king. Don't worry. Oh, where are your kids? Don't worry about it. Yeah, you can fill in what happened there. It was not good. Things went bad. Werewolves, potentially linked to a different story, but it's a very, very similar one. Atreus going down here as well. That, Sisyphus, I believe, the most thing he did is he also like mouthed off to the gods, but also like tried to, well, succeeded in trapping death. Like, managed to delay his death and come back for a bit, and then like actually trap death. Like, his big thing is fighting against death, not giving up, not giving into it, in a way that's shown to be problematic in these stories for because his biggest revenge was like is that in Tartarus he has to push a rock up a hill, show the futility and having to repeat endlessly the same task, trying to fight against death. And that shows okay, it's better to like give in to accept your fate. I don't believe in that. I'm a vampire. I'm all for okay, keep going, keep fighting against it. Like you choose when to accept it. Not how it works for a lot of people. But I really got to give the guy credit for that, honestly. So up in B tier for some shady methods, but I can appreciate where it comes from. Phaethon is a son of Apollo who went to like Apollo to prove like, hey, all my friends are laughing at me. Let me prove that I'm your son. Apollo's like, sure, take any boon. Phaethon like, great, I want to drive your chariot. Big old moral lesson about okay, like don't get bigger than your britches. Don't shoot for things that you can't control. Ends up like burning a bit of the surface of the world. Guy is really passive aggressive in the Ovid story of this myth, for whatever reason. Phaethon he's a kid who wanted to like impress his dad and impress his friends and prove that he was something great and did something stupid because of it. But I'm not going to stick him in a low tier for burning the earth because he was a teenager, he was a kid. I really can't get on his case for that. So probably just C tier for did a lot of harm, didn't mean to, just an idiot. Pandora. Pandora gets a bad rap that she does not deserve. She was literally created by the gods to trick Polyphemus into like opening up or like being the cause of like all the death in the world, like revenge on Prometheus. In a way that she was set up for failure and then blamed for said failure and a victim of her own creation, but also like, oh, clearly you did this, you brought all the evils into the world. There's been a story that Hope would have escaped from the urn, except that she closed the box before it could, thereby retaining hope for humanity, and like make sure it didn't like fly away and just leave. But also, it's mostly pity for Pandora, honestly, that she was created, the first woman, to be like a trap and like, oh, look at how beautiful she is, but it's all just evil and like it's all evil inside or whatever. It's Greek myth sometimes, but sticking her up in B tier is honestly deserved better than she got. Midas. Midas touch, famous of course. Actually not that bad of a guy. The reason he got the Midas touch is because he took care of Silenus, like the kind of leader of all the satyrs, who was super drunk and hungover, and like found him and kept him safe and took care of him for the night. So Dionysus came and was like, "Hey, want a boon?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'd like more money. Give me like white touch turns into gold." And then regrets it. Some versions, like once he can no longer eat, some versions he like holds on to it until he like hugs his daughter, and then his daughter turns to gold, and then he instantly like pivots on it. But in most cases, he literally just like tells he just talks to Dionysus again, says, "Hey, can you please take this away?" And Dionysus is like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." One of the chiller stories about Dionysus, but Midas like genuinely wasn't being cursed or punished for anything. He was being rewarded for something but just being rewarded by Dionysus, who's not going to play anything straight. So, also B tier, and made some mistakes, almost got his daughter turned into gold permanently, but not out of, and was kind of greedy, but honestly didn't seem like that bad of a guy. Pasiphae. Bit of a weird one. Pasiphae is the wife of King Minos, who gave birth to the Minotaur. And because of that, she's seen as this like evil figure in a lot of cases. Short story is Poseidon's like gifted a white bull to King Minos under the circumstance that he would sacrifice it to him. Minos did not sacrifice from bull instead, so Poseidon made sure that Pasiphae, his wife, was cursed to fall in love with the bull and to like have the Minotaur as like this curse upon the kingdom. We get into the whole Minotaur, labyrinth, all that, etc. But Pasiphae was kind of like, in some versions of the story, it was her who told her, like, who insisted on that Minos not sacrifice the bull. Some versions he did of his own accord. Was unsure exactly what her punishment was deserved for it and gave her to the Minotaur. But my assumption is that King Minos probably didn't have a whole lot of attachment to the Minotaur, where he had no part in its birth. It's this clear like shame upon the kingdom. But the fact that it wasn't killed, I mean that they couldn't kill it, but that they just kept it alive and tried to keep it around. I honestly that feels like Pasiphae trying to protect what she had like what they caused and given birth to, however much affection there might have been or not been there, trying to protect that when it wasn't like her fault and she was cursed to do it. So probably C tier again, and that kind of weird and whacked up, but also like I can see some like the goodness in there, and it's conflicting enough to go in C tier. Last one, Helen of Troy. This is also one that is extremely conflicting because the story as it goes is very unclear on if Helen went willingly or was bewitched by Aphrodite. There's some versions, like I think it's in the Iliad itself, where she shows like she's not super fond of being there. And when Paris goes out to try and fight, Aphrodite tries to help him. He instantly fails. He did like single combat against one of the warriors against Menelaus, like Helen's original husband. He then lost, got moved back to his bedroom by Aphrodite, who made sure that Helen was already there and waiting to like take care of him, whatever. It's really weird. But again, it's very unsure. Like she gets blamed for being the cause of the Trojan War. That was not on her. Again, Aphrodite, you knew there's a pact. Why would you do this? But I can't see Helen as anything more than a victim, honestly. There's a different version of the myth where, not a myth, but like a later drama, where the Helen that was in Troy was a fake one, and the real Helen had actually been whisked away to somewhere in Egypt, and was like working away in there, and just living her life far away from it all, and kind of, and like later like was found by someone, like brought back, whatever. But again, didn't seem like her only crime is being the quote unquote most beautiful woman in the world. I don't feel like you can put the entire like crime of the Trojan War and everything that led up to and resulted in upon the shoulders of someone who either was ensorcelled to go or basically given to someone else as a prize for choosing Aphrodite as the most beautiful in a contest over an apple. It's all stupid, and Helen did not deserve the rap that she has. So, again, conflicting. But I think I put her a little bit above Pasiphae and probably tied with Midas and B, and like did nothing wrong, gets a bad rap. So that is the Greek mythology tier list. Again, more figures that I could have included. There's a lot of people in Greek mythology. There's various nymphs. There's other stories like who appear like a single time or whatever. And these are some of the bigger ones, at least in the gods, or like bigger stories that are talked about. I want to go over kind of where I put them. So to go over this briefly, just kind of summarize some of just like talk through where I ended up. Hephaestus, Hestia, and Hecate. I just realized that all three of those start with an HE. Might as well stick like Hermes and Hector up there while I'm at it. They're just an A tier, just one away. But Hephaestus, Hestia, and Hecate I like because they didn't do anything wrong, seem genuinely helpful, and I just like what they stand for. A gets Athena, Hermes, Odysseus, Atalanta, Hector, Perseus, Nyx, Persephone, Rhea, and the Muses. People that seem, again, helpful, don't have much like going wrong, and I like what they vibe with, but not as like a little more like controversial than the pure S tier. B rank is Poseidon, Artemis, Dionysus, Demeter, Theseus, Achilles, Pan, Tyche, Sisyphus, Pandora, Midas, and Helen. Characters that have some issues, but I still like, or seem like they get a bad rap, but there's not a whole lot about them. This is kind of the pity rank in a lot, at least how it came to it by the end. But to start off with like Poseidon and Artemis, Dionysus as like people that I like but made mistakes. C rank is Hades, Ares, Heracles, Bellerophon, Furies, Eris, Fates, Iris, Phaethon, Pasiphae, as a kind of catch-all for either characters that there's just not a lot about, true neutral, or ones that I like have some issues but aren't inherently harmful. Rank D is Hera, Leto, Eros, Orion, and Orestes. They're characters who make problems, have issues, but don't seem that bad or are in bad circumstances. E rank is Apollo, Aphrodite, and Phaedra, characters who cause issues and not inherently evil, but they make a whole lot more problems than they solve. Rank F, the irredeemable rank for Zeus, Jason, Agamemnon, Kronos, Tantalus, and Atreus, characters who make everything around them actively worse, it feels like, in how they mess with things and interfere with things. And normally I'd probably be a lot more afraid of getting some kind of divine attribution for sticking Zeus in the F tier, but I'm a vampire, I'm immortal, what can he do about it? So that's it for the tier list. Please let me know any thoughts. Feel free to like comments with where you'd pit people if you disagree. Be respectful about it, be respectful to the commenters and to me. We're all people. But that's going to be it for the stream then. I think I've gone through everything I needed to, organize them where I believe they stand, and shouted my opinions into the void as I said I would. So thank you for tuning in and watching. Take care, and, well, have an enjoyable day.